Behind the Scene with David Bedein. It's appropriate to talk now about the upcoming American elections. You can tell from my English that I come from America. I don't vote in the American elections because I live here in Israel. When I came here, I said to my sister, "You'll be in America, I'll be here. I'll vote here in Israel, you'll vote in America." Fine. My policy for 50 years of being in Israel is not to be reporting has been to report about the U.S., but not to vote and not to be involved in the U.S. process. This year, however, I think it's very, very important to point out how important the American elections are for the integrity of the Middle East and for the future of the world. Usually, as I say, I haven't in 50 years taken a position on the American elections. This year, however, there's something new. The current president of the United States has done something that no other president did: to cut off the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, to cut their offices in Washington, because he discovered that the offices of the PLO in Washington were involved in direct terrorist activity. Now, this is a new school book put out by the Palestinian Authority, funded by the Palestine Liberation Organization and UNRWA, the United Nations Relief Works Agency, and a fourth grade school book. It seems to be innocuous, and all of a sudden you see on page 51 a picture of a woman in a military garb. Her name is Dalal al-Mughrabi, and this is put out as a new book with a message to the Palestinian Arab children that they have to grow up and be like this woman. She is Dalal al-Mughrabi, who attacked a bus in March 1978, killing 15 adults and 13 children, 25 adults and 13 children. And before she got on the bus, they landed their little boat. A group of terrorists landed on a little boat near Caesarea and murdered an American photographer, Gail Rubin, the niece of Senator Abe Ribakov. And when they got on the hill overlooking the road, they saw a bus coming along, and they stopped the bus. And the bus driver, who I actually had a chance to meet and interview, he didn't know what this was all about. And all of a sudden, they pulled out their weapons and started killing people on the bus. They hijacked the bus, and when they got to a certain junction, they started killing people on the bus. And this book, made for little children, glorifies this killer, and that's the work of the PLO. The current president of the United States has been standing up to the PLO. His opposition, Senator, now Vice President Bedein, swears that he will restore relations with the PLO if elected. This is a lethal act to take. Now, he also wants to restore relations with Mahmoud Abbas. Mahmoud Abbas wrote this as his doctoral thesis. I have it here in Arabic. You can find bits and pieces on the internet. It's called The Secret Relationship between Nazi Germany and the Zionists, claiming that it was the Zionists who committed the murderous genocidal act of the killing of 6 million Jews in 21 nations. This is taught in the schools of what's called the Palestinian Authority. This is the prime document of the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization. Now, what we'll show you in a few minutes is a film of children who, in the mornings in these schools that they put together, the PLO puts it together. The funding is coming through UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, where children at the beginning of their school sing about murdering the Jews, extermination of the Jews. President Trump cut off the American funding to UNRWA when he saw its reality. Vice President Bedein, his opposition, wants to restore the funding with no restrictions, no constraints. This is a very serious issue, and I fear for my life here in Israel if Bedein is elected and their strong support for the unilateral recognition of the PLO, once again, the Palestine Liberation Organization. There's a whole generation, thanks to what's called the peace process, that has forgotten what the PLO stands for, the Palestine Liberation Organization. The concept of liberating all of Palestine is the focus of every aspect of PLO life ever since the PLO was brought over and actually imported in 1993 to run the lives of the Palestinian Arabs. They signed a document in 1993 on the White House lawn saying they would support peace with Israel and renege anything having to do with terrorism. However, the PLO never ratified that accord. My colleague Pinchas Inbari, who wrote for a newspaper at the time, which was the strongest advocate of what they call the peace process. However, when Arafat would not ratify the accord, and Pinchas Inbari was in Arafat's headquarters when he said, well, he would not ratify the accord, he reported it. No other reporter wanted to report it because it, of course, ran in the face of what's called the peace process. Under President Trump, Israel's had a few years free of the obsession of supporting what's called the Oslo peace process. And Biden threatens or promises to bring that back on the table. It's hard for me to speak to many of my Jewish friends or even family on this issue because they're caught up with the idea that Trump is a bad guy, Biden is a good guy, and that the peace process is a very good thing. Well, I just want to say very clearly that what you've just seen, the doctoral thesis, the picture of a murderer in a school book, this is the basis of what the PLO is all about. And the UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, working on a $1.2 billion budget, which they get from 20 major countries, they take 50%, actually 58% of their budget and use it for the schools, use it for an education whose purpose is to teach the next generation to wipe out the state and people of Israel. It's hard to believe, but you can see it. Look at our website, israelbehindthenews.com, or our new website, unrwa-monitor.com. It speaks for itself. If President Trump is not reelected, then Israel is going to have to suffer under the the oppression of being tied once again to a peace process that cannot work. So all I can say is I'm opening my mouth and saying something very serious. People need to consider these words, that a peace process which promotes war, which promotes genocide, is not appropriate. And Vice President Biden has committed himself to reviving that process. And that is why I find that to be abhorrent and frightening. This is David Bedein reporting from Jerusalem, with thinking of heavy things these days about what might be the future of Israel, might be the future of the world if Biden is elected President of the United States. Good night and good luck. Thank you.